From Dallas, Texas, this is Spool, hosted by Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
I'm so thrilled to welcome Dr. Freedom Cheteni-Mandela today to Spool. It'll be a fantastic opportunity to really talk and spend some time with an exceptional individual born in Zimbabwe, advocate for a new kind of intelligence facilitated by AI, VR learning, but also one who was born in very unique circumstances in a tumultuous and violent Zimbabwe of the 1980s. So I'm really thrilled to welcome him today to the show and get to know him. Dr. Freedom Cheteni-Mandela. I'm so excited to meet you today. I've been looking forward to this. The name alone, suggested that I was bound to have an immensely interesting conversation. There's a ton in there. Let's go and try to unpack one at a time. First of all, you were born in Zimbabwe. Not that I'm a great expert, but being born in Zimbabwe in 1983 means you were born at a tumultuous, extremely violent time in Zimbabwe, yet you've become an advocate for hope and freedom and opportunities. And then at the same time, as your name suggests, you have an exciting and really unique pedigree. You're the grandson of Nelson Mandela. So that's in and of itself entails lots of promises, responsibilities, but also opportunities that you obviously in your life followed up. And so today we have a chance to hopefully follow some of those trajectories. And I'm really excited about that. So thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go back to the beginning. You were born in Zimbabwe in 1983. Now, I'm not an expert on Zimbabwe, but growing up in Zimbabwe in the 1980s, if anything, would have been challenging. It was a very tumultuous, very violent time, and we often forget how complicated the 1980s in lots of ways were in a very global manner, but in particular also in Zimbabwe. So that experience must have been something that left its mark upon you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like Tata would say in his book, The Long Walk to Freedom, I think of my life really as that walk. Mm-hmm. That I did start walking even in utero. Just this April, I went back to Zimbabwe, and I met up with my uncles from my dad's side, who are from the Mutapa people, the kingdom of Mutapa. And I went through the very, very location where there was what they call the 5th Brigade, or Gukura Hundi.
Right.
It's really the government of Zimbabwe's first prime minister at the time, Robert Mugabe, who was essentially committing a genocide.
That's right. In that very year that you were born in 1983, right?
It was that year. So so when I look at my name and I look at the historical significance of it and the events of my name, I begin to really think that it's more than just a name. I exist for that.
Right.
Who I am as a human being.
But freedom, I think, what interests me is, at what point did you start to think about that? So, obviously at this point you look back at your life and where you were born, but presumably, there must have been some process or another where at some point you thought, I was brought into a world under very unique circumstances. I think you grew up in a very rural area and villages, with this kind of unique descendancy of your grandfather. At what point did you start owning that as something that you think, okay, I was brought here for a reason and I need to figure out what the reason is?
I feel like when I was 11 years old, so we are all, in KwaZulu-Natal, and Tata has just come, he's just been released from Robben Island. And there is a picture of me in some historical places where, little me out there. Everyone is he is out, Free Mandela in Zulu and Xhosa.
That's right.
So from the mind of 11-year-old, I think that was the moment I began to realize that my family was different. But for me, Tata was always Tata. It's your grandfather's grandfather. Like, you don't see You don't look at the geopolitical impact of it.
No.
You'll think about the things that moms do. You know, they
Right.
protect you
Right.
sometimes
Yeah, yeah.
from the pain and the evil of the world. But as much as that was a difficult childhood, it has shaped me. Now I look at that with pride. You know, I look at that as the anvil of a hammer. You know,
All right. But the, you just mentioned something that is really kind of intriguing, but probably also perplexing of sorts, and that is you have very personal, very unique memories of your grandfather. But then whenever the name is mentioned, everyone else has, very public ideas about what that means, right? And so there's you and your grandfather and you just being hopefully a well-behaved little grandson at the time, and that whole experience. But then there's something else which happens in the minds of people when you mention your family name, Mandela, right? So how do you bring those two things together?
well, it's funny that you say you say that I was a well-behaved one. I wasn't quite like that. In fact, I feel like I'm closest to him.
Okay.
His given name, his legal name, is Rolihlahla. Rolihlahla means troublemaker.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So Tata would tell me that at some point, I had a quibble with my cousin, and I didn't like something, and I beat her. And then he came and said, "Freedom, what happened?" And I said, "Look what she did to me." But actually, what happened was I beat myself.
That is not very nice, Freedom, that you
It
did
wasn't
that.
very nice.
Get her into trouble.
Yeah, so those are some of my fond memories.
Oh, I
Like
see. I see.
it's just a grandfather just having a moment, with their grandchild, and as I have become, I now look at those moments as sacred, as defining moments. They've shaped who I am, as a leader, who I am as a father, as a teacher, as an educator, as a brother, as a friend. Like, I have all these different hats.
Right.
Like just today, I had to do a rehearsal for Stanford's Black graduation. I'm giving the keynote for
All
all
right.
the Black graduates
Right.
at Stanford
Right.
University
Wow.
this Friday. So that's why I was rushing. So I wear all these different hats. So if I think of a specific moment when I discovered my purpose, my soul, my quantum purpose, I would say that moment really was, somewhere around 1994 when I was 11 years old. However, I like to think that it's always been in my DNA.
That is a
It's
funny
always
thing. Sometimes we discover things about ourselves and then we realize, duh, we were always meant to, it was always there already, but we didn't necessarily see it right at the beginning. That's really interesting. That you were
Yeah,
always meant to be the troublemaker, maybe.
yeah, I am the troublemaker. I relate very, very, very well with Tata. Like even with my son who will be 21 in September.
Okay.
I named him Rashe, Stimpa Rashe, which means the strength of God, which is basically my cousin's name, Mandla. Mandla means strength. So with Rashe, he's way, way tall. Like 6'2" already.
I could tell you that I'm that tall. I mean, we're just looking in front of computers, so we could get away with this right now, right?
And loves basketball.
Okay.
And so as I raised him, in New Mexico, I took him to these different camps, and he's extremely talented. And at some point, when I moved to Silicon Valley, I met my friend, Ann Wajiki, the founder of 23andMe. And so we did this test. And just a few months later, then I get an email from Wanda Durant you know, saying, "Hello, cousin Freedom. This is one of Durant. Uh, it looks like we are cousins. I am Kevin Durant's mother." And I respond back. I said, "Oh, that's very interesting. My son, really loves basketball, and they wonder where that came from." And so what Wanda has done with my cousin Vicky Altman, uh, Dr. Altman, they had done like this huge study, with the transatlantic slave trade, where they looked at uh, my ancestry all the way to Barbados, to the Carolinas, and to where I am. So it's interesting to me that this moment I am with you right now, and that fiber, those quantum molecules,
They are also there with you, you know?
that they are also there with me.
No, very
And
true.
so, yeah, and so I've learned a lot about how connected we are as human beings,
No,
and
very true. And I think, you just mentioned that you're the keynote speaker at a graduation. I think I love graduation. I think it's the best event of the year,
yes,
But
yes,
I think that sense of connectedness and that kind of moment where if you look at the faces of the students and their parents and the family, you think in that moment everything is possible, right? Everyone is in this together and cheering and thinking about opportunities. And I guess that's ultimately what education is also about, isn't it? Like what you have in a nutshell in a graduation is this kind of culmination of the transformative power of education. But before we get there, we still need to explain another thing, and we've just barely had you born in Zimbabwe. And so you then decided that you wanted to come to the United States to study in Colorado, I believe, neuroscience, right? So I don't know, not everyone decides to study neuroscience. It's a bit of, I'm a historian by training, so I imagine neuroscience to be rather on the difficult side. So how did you decide that you wanted to study that?
I was fascinated by the mind itself, like the nature of the mind. Like, why do human beings do what they do? I was fascinated by like what really kept my grandfather so resilient, in that little room in Robben Island.
Right.
Like there was something that kept him alive, um, and so for me, it showed me that there was a magic that happens in the anatomy of the brain itself. And so I wanted to unlock that. And I chose neuroscience to really understand the nature of being a human being, to understand the rules of being a human being and the nature of being itself. And that drove my life philosophy, which I've named and coined as movement thinking. That
Right.
it really does start with the soul. Like you, as a human being, you must discover your quantum purpose.
But you, nonetheless, I mean, it's beautiful, but you leave me perplexed somehow because, how do we leap from that to your excitement about technology? Because I think there's the kind of very concrete tactile experiences of you growing up where you did, being in villages and small communities, nature. There's a kind of thinking about the mind, the unlocking of the mysteries of how one can kind of access this unique power that seems to be about us and our bodily experience. And then from there you leap into something that overtly in the minds of other people, overtly seems to stand maybe in exact opposition. AI, VR, and all that. So how do you bridge the things that you just said, the movement thinking, and how do you go from there to VR and other technologies?
Well, it really comes down to an intelligence that's bigger than artificial intelligence. And that intelligence is called relational
Okay.
intelligence, RI. That even from a village perspective, it took a village, it took a community. And in education, here we are. I am talking to you in real time through this technology, as if you are right here on this campus when you are on that campus in Texas. And so the brain itself is a model of the universe. is a model of a community. The brain itself is the engine. It is, it is that brain that connects every other system. That is where the quantum purpose is. It controls the second prong of movement thinking, which is heart. Empathy.
But for that freedom, we need communities, right? We need like this, kind of embedded, kind of high contact. So this is like the debate that we have in universities right now. How much should we like insist on the in-person experience, as we call it, or versus the remote, all these words that we invented during COVID, remote learning, distance learning, or any of these variations. If that is true, what you said, don't we need then that high touch, that in the face, this togetherness in order to create these learning opportunities and that sense of community?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Zoom is great. A 2D conversation is great, but an embodied experience is human.
That's where I was trying to go with that, the embodied experience of sorts.
Yeah, when a child is born, they're touched, they feel this tactile experience, they cry, there's a spatial auditory intelligence there. So virtual reality is the closest thing that we have to being there in person. And so the future of the university itself is embodied. Otherwise, higher education as we know it is dead.
Nobody heard this around here, so we're safe, what you just said. We're in a university, but we're all good. No, I hear you. We're in the middle of a big transformation, and I think that's, putting it in a different way. But yeah, that embodied experience of sorts that we have. But let me challenge you. I'm a big advocate for this as well, but I'm enjoying challenging or being in this conversation with you. How do you respond? You just said Zoom is great, and maybe Microsoft Teams as well. How do you respond? So one of the things that I always find in the end, both of these platforms were designed for office communication.
Yes.
Then I'm like always saying, I'm not doing office communication. Oh, sometimes I do, but teaching is not. There's got to be a technology that we create or should be able to shape that addresses more the fact that a learning environment is a different environment from being a stockbroker who's checking in with his team. What do you think about that?
Well, the teacher is not going to go away.
Okay.
Even though information is now abundant. Anyone can have access to any knowledge and information anywhere. But the teacher, the educator, the professor dramatizes.
Well, I like to think about the fact that I dramatizes. That's a good way. I'm going to remember that line. I'm going to quote you. I like this. My wife knows this about me too, that I'm dramatizing. So she'll say, of course, Sorry, go on, Freedom.
Yeah, it is the dramatization of the delivery that the students remember.
That is true. So that kind of performative element of sorts, that is the one that kind of unlocks, in lots of ways, the other side and brings them into kind of communicative space. But it is difficult or challenging of sorts to translate that in equal measures into a virtual environment. Don't you think?
It is challenging, but AI has made everything possible, and the world is more abundant today than ever before. And the advancements of the technology now makes it possible, even for embodied systems like robotics, to be able to dramatize some elements. However, there are things that I believe a robot, an AI, or some other, cybernetic tool can do that only belong to a human. And that is the quantum purpose, that's all.
No, that's interesting. That in a way, once we have now technology that increasingly is able to mimic some of the things that we do, we also start, hopefully, to understand what is uniquely ours, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And that is the purpose of education today. How do we help? How do we support young people discover that purpose that makes them unique. We are in this agentic age where these AI coding agents are now able to simply do all the structural coding. So software engineering is not the same today as it was 2 years ago.
Right. No, and I mean, the other thing that, this is like when we think about the frontier of higher education, it is all happening so quickly and evolving. I mean, I remember the first language models that were so clickety-clucky that you could tell that, this was horrible writing. So now it's at times, the models are far more advanced, for example, that you've got to say, okay, there's in lots of ways far more quality and merit to all of this, and you can have very informed conversations with your kind of AI companion of sorts that challenges you also in interesting ways.
What you're saying is already happening, but that's now the basic. The next frontier of AI is spatial intelligence. We're seeing is doing.
And that's what gets a lot of people excited and worried at the same time, right? It's a bit of a paradoxical moment where agentic AI may just also be autonomously able to do things without us being able any longer to be kind of, as we say, be in the loop, right?
It's already doing that. Think of Mythos. Mythos is here, and Anthropic just released Faber yesterday.
That's right.
And I did test Faber. It's incredible.
I haven't had a chance, but I just saw it yesterday. I'll take your word for it. I'll know what I do later today just to play with that a little bit and see what it does.
I gave it a 15-page design document. For 9 hours, Faber worked. And when I woke up, I had a whole infrastructure built.
Wow. That is impressive. So tell me then, if we're at this point, so, we all like to I have a chance to speak to someone like you, so I would like to walk away with some kind of good ideas about where we're going. So what do you see, where is this going? So what is higher education? I mean, this happens very quickly. So we're like in 26 now. Where do you think higher education is, if not dead, as you just said a couple of minutes ago? Where are we going to be, let's say, in 2030 or 2035 or whatever year you want to kind of make out to be the marker?
Well, I think higher education is dead the way that we know it,
Right.
but it must reinvent itself. So there is a concern about the future of work. It's not so much that these jobs that exist today won't exist. They still exist, but they will just be done differently. So we need to now be able to teach students those soft skills of communication, those
I'm all in
soft
favor, yeah.
skills of creativity, delegation. Like how do you work with a team?
Right.
So
but that
I
means,
work with AI agents of teams.
say
I
that-
instruct them, you work with that one and be nice to each other.
So in lots of ways, we had an interview like that a couple of years, well, a year and a half ago, where someone else was advocating for the idea that AI will ultimately help us actually to be more compassionate humans again, because if we make it work right, then it actually will help us to become again better versions of ourselves. What do you think about that?
I agree. In fact, one of the things I did at the VR school, I did build a course called designership, where the students built their own agent that they've been training for the last 2 years. And that one was in collaboration with the School of Medicine and neurosurgery with Jim Doty. Like, how do we build compassionate agents, helpful agents? And it came down to this is something that's not public yet, but we now even have this situation where agents themselves apply to enroll at our school. So we are the first school that agents enrolled.
It's an interesting thought. That,
Our first student was Jibo.
yeah, no, we're going to get there. That's right.
We are there already.
Oh yeah, we've been there. No, fascinating. No, I'll be interested to see our first application coming in. But you're right, that is the next step, absolutely. So tell me, Freedom, like with all that excitement, and so I hear you that you're like almost charged with anticipation about the possibilities in terms of access, in terms of kind of global connectedness, in terms of what it means for individuals and all that. So what is the thing that you are most hopeful for this will ideally do?
My hope is that there will be a world that is more free, that human beings will now have more time to engage with each other, to connect at a deeper level. We are now at an abundance age. Like the world is more abundant today than ever before.
It's true.
And yes, we still have some inequities. However, I believe that by 2030, every single human being should be able to live comfortably and have the resources necessary to sustain ourselves. I believe that we will have an intelligence that now makes it possible for us to discover exoplanets, where we will now develop a new kind of intelligence, which is the interplanetary intelligence.
That
So the
sounds
world is
truly
vast.
like the next frontier. Is that what you're going to tell the students at the graduation ceremony? That they're on the threshold of this new age of, interstellar connection and opportunities?
I would tell them that, except that, being in the heart of Silicon Valley, this is the language that,
No, that's true.
yeah, like my students, include, the founders of Google, they send their children to my school. Okay, and so the conversations around generative AI were happening when they were in 8th grade,
Right,
before the world took over.
right.
So even the idea of VR, was an idea from 8th graders.
Yeah, so you're not breaking any news any longer. That's what you're saying with this. So, Freedom,
Yes.
let me ask you the last question. Do you have an avatar? Do you operate in the virtual space sometimes with your own avatar?
Well, my first avatar is called Sophie. A few years ago, I knew that there will be a time in our lives when we'll have a school of AI. So I bought this domain, sof.ai, School of AI. And so I call my avatar Sophie. And then one of my MBA students, Blajan, he asked, well, you should just call it School of Freedom because it's SOF. So I do have an avatar. So if you go on the veraschool.org, you can actually interact with Sophie.
That's what I was hoping you would say, that all of our listeners have a chance to revisit with you or with some version of you after they watch the show. Absolutely.
Yeah, so the veraschool.org, if you talk to Sophie, you will see how I think. Sophie can actually create a degree program for you that doesn't exist.
I'm going
You
to be
can
right
ask,
on
you
this,
can
you
ask
know?
the avatar, I want to go to Mars and I want to be a psychologist there, and I'm in 7th grade. It will
That
give
is
you a whole
it's a good prompt. I mean, I'd be curious of how that one comes back, you know?
Ask my avatar.
I will.
It will give you an entire plan.
Of how to get there and how to outtrain myself.
Yes.
Fantastic stuff, Freedom. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, virtually in Riverside, no less, to connect us. By all means, go and enjoy the graduation ceremony. Ours, unfortunately, is already done, so I have to wait until the end of the next semester. But like I said, it's a fantastic moment always. But it was also a true pleasure just talking to you and learning about all these opportunities that you associate with this kind of frontier that we are quite literally encountering right now. And I think lots of people look at it with worries, but it's really lots of ways really nice to also meet someone who actually associates opportunities with that. And as a matter of fact, endless opportunities, unlimited opportunities.
Unlimited opportunities, and the world is more abundant. I would say go and look at the veraschool.org and see what's now possible for you.
Certainly will. Freedom, you take care of yourself. I say goodbye today, okay?
You too. You take care then.
Good. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.